Just recently, Fedor Emelianenko brightly knocked out Tim Johnson at the Bellator 269 tournament and showed that he is still a very dangerous fighter. He was too early to write off. Someone considers Fedor the greatest heavyweight and the fighter in history, but someone doubts his regalia and achievements in Pride. But one way or another, along with Mike Tyson, he brought hundreds of thousands of young guys to the gym and became a huge popularizer of MMA all over the world. Fedor never fought in UFC, and that is why some people doubt him. But during his career, he fought 10 times with fighters who at different times became UFC champions, and will recall each of these fights in order to understand how good Fedor Emelianenko was.
Fedor was in his prime and focusing on fighting. Wow!
The first UFC champion, however an interim one, that Fedor faced was Minotauro Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and the fight itself took place at the Pride 25 tournament. Antonio was the first Pride heavyweight champion, and at the time of the bout with Fedor, his record was 19 wins, 1 defeat and 1 draw. At the same time, among the defeated were completely the elite of that time. Volkan, Gary Goodrich, Kiyoshi Tamura, Anson Inoue, Semishil, Dan Henderson, Mark Coleman, and many others. So the level of Minotauro's opposition was just outrageous, and he was the favorite of this fight. As for Fedor, he moved to Pride from Rings, where he became the champion of the tournament in the open weight, and at that time had a record of 12 wins and 1 defeat, at the same time very controversial due to a cut inflicted by an illegal elbow from Tsuyoshi Kosaka.
Will there be kicks? Will there be punches? Who will land first?
From the very beginning of the battle, Nogueira tried to transfer Fedor to canvas and didn't even know that soon his wish would come true and wouldn't bring him anything good. Fedor took the guard and very unpleasantly surprised the opponent with his brutal ground and pound.
Right there. It was a strike. Oh, big punches! He's got him!
Nogueira tried to save himself with a Kimura, then with a triangle, but that evening Fedor's defense was on the other level, and even such a master of jiu-jitsu as Minotauro couldn't catch Fedor with a submission. The question of the first round was only whether Fedor could finish Nogueira or he could outstage this onslaught. Although Minotauro was familiar with difficulties and was one of the most persistent and desperate guys of the Pride, so he endured and waited for the mistakes of the last emperor. The second and third rounds were held according to the same scheme as the first, but specifically on the canvas with the full control and domination of Fedor. But this is not the case when the fight that goes down there becomes boring. So that evening Nogueira couldn't see through the underdog named Fedor, and a new owner appeared at the championship belt, and Fedor later called their fight one of the most important in his career. This is how one of the most bright confrontations of the Pride began.
After winning the belt and 4 victories in a row in Pride, Fedor took part in the 2004 Grand Prix in the rank of the heavyweight champion. At the same time, Nogueira defeated Krokop, and now in the status of interim champion also took part in the tournament, and their meeting in the final would be the most suitable place for a rematch of the 2 best heavyweights of that time. But first, Fedor had to pass a member of the UFC Hall of Fame and the second champion on his way, Mark Coleman, who is rightfully considered the father of the ground and pound style. Fedor starts the attack with his mill, but Mark transfers him to the ground and enters the full mount, and then turns out to be behind the back of the last emperor. But Fedor slips out of Coleman's strong paws and makes the guillotine in a stance.
Alexander Emelianenko's brother and Vladimir Voronov. He's got and Coleman at the top.
Mark was again able to transfer Fedor to the ground, but this second takedown was fatal and the last for him. Fedor caught Mark with an armbar and made him tap. A very nice victory for the last emperor, which makes Coleman very upset, with whom they will fight in a couple of years in revenge. At the next stage of the same tournament, Fedor was waiting for another UFC champion, a longtime friend of defeated Mark Coleman, the monster Kevin Randleman, who loudly declared himself at the first stage by making a daring upset and knocking out the favorite Mirko Krokop. At the time of the fight with Fedor, the monster had 15 victories and 7 defeats, and in this battle he intended to create another massive upset.
Can Randleman
Turns
take
it
him
around.
down? Whoa!
Such a flight couldn't be survived by a living person, but Fedor could. After such a difficult flight at most airlines, Fedor managed not only to survive, but also to create a comeback by making a Kimura and forcing the monster to tap. It was a very cool and historic moment, and at that time, even such crazy suplex couldn't stop the champion's movement of the Lost Emperor.
Those are some nice people. I talked to them every now and then.
Yeah.
And the coach's wife got a nice butt, nice and big, and so I like to watch around them, hang around them, make sure they're okay, you know. So they're nice people, you know.
A fan of Sir Mix-a-Lot, I take it.
At the final of the same tournament, Fedor came to revenge with Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, who after losing to the Emperor won 5 battles in a row and became an interim champion. And the winner of the final would become not only the champion of the Grand Prix, but also united the champion belts, thereby becoming the best of the best.
Fight for the title, it has come down to Emelianenko versus Nogueira, champion.
At the beginning, the fight moved to the canvas and Fedor spent about 3 minutes in the guard of Nogueira, who was much better prepared for the opponent than in their first fight. In one of the episodes, the fighters unintentionally collided with their heads and Fedor had a deep cut. The fight was stopped and the final received the status of no contest. Such an expected event for the whole world of MMA ended with such a big disappointment. But they didn't end there. After the battle, Nogueira said that Fedor deliberately went for this clash, since he couldn't find the key to defeating the Brazilian, and Fedor in turn replied that what happened was more likely to play for the Minotauro himself. In any case, the Grand Prix needed a champion, and after 4 months this fight was organized again.
Main event of Shockwave, it should be a classic.
Fedor's gameplay was now different from what we saw in the first 2 battles. He made excellent user throws and takedowns, transferring the Brazilian to canvas, but at the same time trying not to go into the Minotauro's guard, but decided to work more in the stance, where he did well.
In this fight, you guys.
Nice takedown by Fedor.
And a soccer kick.
Having trouble getting Emelianenko at all.
And there it is again.
Every time they get close, he gets slung to the mat.
Nogueira throughout the fight didn't abandon attempts to drag Fedor down, but he clearly followed his plan and worked in a stance. And even when the Brazilian managed to transfer the fight to the ground, his jiu-jitsu didn't help him to turn the tide and take the victory in this fight.
Unanimous decision for Fedor, as we suspected.
So Fedor, by the second time, still managed to win against Nogueira by unanimous decision and became the champion of the Grand Prix in heavyweight by uniting the belts. The domination of the Lost Emperor continued, and the victory over the top Minotauro at that time was much appreciated, since in his entire Pride career he lost only to Fedor twice, and by split decision to Josh Barnett.
At the Pride 32 tournament, Fedor again met in a fight with Mark Coleman. Hammer's form was already far from the top, but I'm sure he came out to this fight with a special attitude and seriously intended to stop the domination of the Lost Emperor. And before this fight, the Hammer defeated Mauricio Rua, after which a serious brawl in the ring began between Team Hammerhouse and the Shogun team.
Deal, Fedor versus Coleman.
The Hammer, as expected from the very beginning, flew for the legs of Fedor, but the champion defended himself perfectly and punched back Coleman's head and body. Mark acted too straightforward, and the only thing he could count on was a takedown and a ground and pound. But all his achievements can be seen in this frame. Bloody face, and Fedor is still on his feet. In the second round, Coleman still gets his way and transfers Fedor to the canvas, but for him it all ends not in the best way. Everything is as if copied their first fight. Armbar and Mark is stopped. So Fedor beat the next UFC champion, although not in the most peak form.
I will be back. I will fucking be back. He's the best. I'll be back, I guarantee it.
In In 2008, the American clothing company Affliction burst into the world of MMA under the leadership of Donald Trump. The first tournament was held on July 19, 2008 and was called Banned, as it brought together the best fighters who didn't have a contract with the UFC. And in the main event of the evening, the former Pride champion Fedor Emelianenko and the former UFC champion Tim Sylvia met, who were supposed to play the Affliction champion title. Sylvia, nicknamed the Maniac, threw sharp statements towards Fedor, like Fedor was a coward and was fleeing the most powerful fighters in the world who were just in UFC, and here is a hero arrived to the tournament to show everyone the real champion in action.
Heavyweight belt, Big John. Oh, nice. Sharp left there by
Fedor, already in the first minute, became a maniac himself, and having run into Tim, smashed him with his mill, sacrificing the talkative champion to the Pride fans and delighted commentators, who emotionally called him Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan from the world of MMA. Fedor became the first champion of Affliction, and Randy Couture came out to congratulate him and challenge him to fight, to which he immediately received consent, but unfortunately we never saw this fight.
The people, and this is Affliction is all about who's the best.
In January 2009, M1 Global, together with Golden Boy Promotion, made a fight between another UFC champion Andrei Arlovski and Fedor. Arlovski really wanted to overthrow the last emperor from the throne. For this, he held a magnificent camp under the guidance of the famous boxing coach Freddie Roach. Roach criticized Fedor's boxing technique and stated that the last emperor had no chance against Arlovski, and Andrei compared himself with Buster Douglas and wanted to show the world the same stunning upset. It is also noteworthy that the fighters who came to fight in Affliction didn't hesitate to ask for huge fees. So for example, Andrei, according to Wikipedia, received 1.5 million for the battle, and Fedor was 5 times less. These were the strange things that happened in Affliction.
Arlovski at 6'4" with that length. Oh, good right. Push kick by Arlovski. That's it.
In general, Andrei looked better than Fedor, and after several responseless attacks, pinned the emperor into a corner, and then, believing in himself, decided to kick with a flying knee, and woke up already lying on the floor, as Fedor's overhand switched off the light for him. This way, Fedor won another victory over the champion of UFC and defended his title, while this knockout was recognized as the best in 2009 according to the Sherdog. After the collapse of the Affliction and the failure in negotiations with the UFC, Fedor signed a contract with the Strikeforce and knocked out Brett Rogers in his debut.
Fatality.
Then he got a Jiu-Jitsu black belt Fabricio Werdum as a rival, who went on a record of 13-4 and was considered as a clear underdog, and Fedor himself hadn't lost for 10 years and his unbeaten streak was 28 fights in a row.
And he drops it.
The beginning of the fight, and Fedor puts Werdum on his ass, but makes a fatal mistake and goes on finishing moves. The whole principle of Jiu-Jitsu in one episode, give in to win. Werdum pulled Fedor down and played his game. He made a triangle around his neck and made him tap. The fall of the last emperor was very loud. He was defeated by the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master, and after that Werdum's shares took off seriously, and he rose to the 3rd place in the world among heavyweights according to the Sherdog, and this submission was recognized as the submission of the year in 2010. Werdum was ready to give Fedor revenge and wanted to fight in Russia, but got a hand injury and revenge never took place. After losing to Werdum, Fedor lost twice more to Dan Henderson and to Bigfoot, and also retired, but he couldn't leave for a long time without fights, and in 2015 he returned to business. In 2017 he signed to Bellator, where he immediately lost by knockout to Matt Mitrione. After another defeat, Fedor took part in the Grand Prix of the heavyweights, and at the first stage fought with the same veteran and former UFC champion Frank Mir, who was really far from the best shape, but it should be admitted that Fedor had already been on a decline for a long time. Fedor won this fight by a knockout and reached the final of that rally, where he lost by a knockout to Ryan Bader. And then there was a meeting with the last at the moment UFC champion Quinton Jackson. But I don't stop on these fights in detail, since these were fights of veterans far from the peak, and therefore I think there is no need to focus on those victories. So as a result, Fedor fought 10 times with the champions of UFC during his career and won 9 times. Although not all of them were in top shape, but still, Nogueira is a real ultra top, whom Fedor beat twice. Arlovski and Sylvia, as far as I remember, were in good shape. Coleman and Randleman are always dangerous fighters. Just remember Kevin's knockout in the fight with Krokop. So as for me, Fedor may well be considered the strongest heavyweight in history. Well, or at least one of the best. It's up to everyone's business and choice. What do you think about this? Be sure to write your opinions in the comments. Do you consider Fedor to be the best, or do the achievements of Stipe Miocic interrupt the exploits of the Lost Emperor? If you liked my review, don't wait to like to promote the video to the top, and if you haven't yet subscribed, be sure to subscribe to be in touch and not to miss the next reviews.